Grace produced a small key seemingly from nowhere and moved quickly from the window to the large, carved cherrywood desk at the center of the room. She opened a drawer in the desk, then felt around within it. There was a soft clicking noise as a smaller, hidden compartment descended into place. She unlocked the secret drawer and pulled it open. Splayed within, like an open deck of cards, were the legal documents that would set into motion a deadly, serious scavenger hunt for the very clues she'd worked her whole life to protect. But she was dying, and someone must come forward who was strong enough to stand against the Vespers. Now that the moment had finally arrived, however, she found that she was hesitating. She picked up the small pen that lay beside the documents, just a bit of ink to paper, and she would drop her only grandchildren into the fray. Such terrible things from such small doses. Grace set the pen down. All her life, Grace had been tormented by the worry that someone with selfish or evil aims would find the 39 clues. But for 500 years, the clues had remained safely hidden. Saladin approached cautiously, watching Grace tuck the documents back into the secret desk drawer. No one had ever been able to locate all the clues. Soon, Grace would be dead, and here she was, on Christmas morning, laying down plans to protect them from her grave. She wouldn't place such a heavy burden on the two people she loved most, Amy and Dan Cahill, her grandchildren. Grace locked the drawer once more and moved hurriedly to the phone on the other side of the room. Saladin scampered out of her path as she crossed, now completely oblivious to him. The world was safe enough without eccentric old Grace Cahill shaking things up one last time. The Vespers hadn't been heard from in over a decade, and Grace pushed them firmly out of her mind. It was decided. The secrets of the clues would die with her. It was Christmas, and Dan Cahill was not in a good mood. "Sit down, dweeb," Amy said. "You're making me nervous." "What's taking her so long?" Dan said, pacing back into the cramped living room from the bathroom. "Grace was supposed to call 2 hours ago." Dan was dressed in his usual Christmas outfit, a black ninja costume, complete with plastic throwing stars stuffed into his pockets. "I can't imagine why she'd be trying to delay the inevitable," said Amy, looking back down at the Tchaikovsky biography she had open on her lap. "Maybe it has something to do with the neighbors seeing an 11-year-old ninja being driven up to her house." "Grace has way weirder people than me coming in and out all the time," Dan said. "You, on the other hand, are about as boring as it gets. If Grace is worried about anyone cramping her style, I'd point to the gloomy nerd reading about Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky. He composed the score for the ballet, The Nutcracker." Dan threw his hands up. "How am I supposed to get any better at making you sound like a loser if you just do all the work for me." Amy cocked her arm back to throw her book at her brother. Dan yelped and bolted into his room, slamming the door. A handwritten sign on the front read, "For No Nerds." Amy sighed and lowered the book back onto her lap. At this point, she was just pretending to read. She couldn't actually concentrate on the sentences in front of her while she waited for Grace's call. In her pocket, her cell phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and she kept imagining she felt it ringing, but it never did. Dan was always a little exasperating this time of year, even more than his usual day-to-day annoying, but this holiday had been especially trying for the two Cahill siblings. Amy looked around, taking in the tiny apartment. Paper Christmas decorations and streamers were strewn along half the room. They cut off abruptly, though, the streamers falling limply to the carpet. Frida, their most recent au pair, had been hanging them when Amy and Dan's guardian called to lay her off. Amy and Dan were orphans. Their parents had died in a fire years ago, though they were legally in the care of their great-aunt Beatrice. She opted to have the siblings housed apart from her, hiring a constant and varied stream of live-in au pairs to watch over them. They never lasted very long. Beatrice had a habit of quickly firing them, often for no reason at all. Dan emerged from his room after a few minutes. He'd switched out the ninja getup for a sweater, jeans, and his backpack, but he still had the mask hanging around his neck. He held a plastic throwing star up in defense position. "Try anything with the book, and you're getting this right between the eyes," he said. "If you throw that anywhere near my face, dweeb, they'll be burying you in that goofy costume." Dan narrowed his eyes. "You are a worthy rival, nerd-san." Amy smirked and shook her head. "Listen, I wouldn't worry," she said as a sort of peace offering. "I'm sure Grace is busy with something important. Maybe she's getting us a really incredible present. A little bit late." She wished there was more she could do for Dan. Her little brother would never admit how sad he was, but she knew. Earlier in the day, she'd presented him with his Christmas present to try to cheer him up. A huge pack full of bottle rockets. It had taken her months to save up for the gift and convince Frida to do the actual purchasing for her. Still, it was worth it to see Dan get excited about something, even if just for a little while. She knew that presents weren't everything. Every holiday story since holiday stories began had drilled that point home. But they didn't hurt either. Dan shrugged and lowered the throwing star. He shook his backpack off and dug through it, pulling out the pack of bottle rockets. "Can we shoot some of these off while we wait?" Amy thought about it for a moment. "You wouldn't rather do it at Grace's house, with all that space in the yard?" "I have some ideas I want to try out," Dan said with a grin. Like, what happens if you tie 2 or even 3 rockets together, end to end, so they'll all be pulling in opposite directions? Someone gets hurt, probably, Amy said, doubtfully. Oh, something even cooler than that. We should probably just wait for Grace, Amy said, looking back down at her book biography. Dan crossed his arms. You know what? I'm tired of waiting. If we aren't important enough for her to pick us up on time on Christmas, I don't see why she should keep me from having fun. I'm going out. He replaced the rockets in his backpack and slipped it over his shoulder, then stalked over to the apartment door and opened it. Wait, what? Amy said, looking up from the book. No. What should I say to Grace? Tell her I'm busy with something important. Slam. Suddenly, Amy was alone in the apartment, alone with Tchaikovsky. Fine. If Dan wanted to act like a brat, that wasn't her problem. She lifted the book to her face and stared at it intently. All of 10 seconds passed before she hauled herself up with a sigh of resignation, grabbed her coat from the hanger by the door, and followed her brother out.